everybody does, where I ask, can you see my screen? So give me 1 second.
There you go.
Everybody see my screen?
Looks good.
Awesome. Okay, so like I said, this is the 4th installment, and it's in regards to inclusion, which is the 4th installment for the JEDI series. Now, this course will be worth 1 CEU credit, and what we're going to do today is we're going to identify inclusive deficiencies within the architectural profession as well as the architectural workplace. We're going to learn how to discuss and explain positive and negative inclusive behaviors. We're going to promote inclusivity within the architectural workspace, and I'm going to show you how you can do that. And finally, we're going to learn how to assess growth within the architectural workspace environment. Now, that is a mouthful. So what we first need to do is understand what JEDI is. Now, JEDI, the acronym stands for Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And if you have been here through our 4 series, first of all, thank you. It's been 4 weeks and 4 weeks worth of great conversation. Vanessa kicked us off with a discussion on justice. And with justice, we want to remove the barriers that hinder us in our growth. Next, Mr. Kreger Carr talked about equity and what equity means and how we learn to allocate necessities based on the needs of the person themselves. Then last week we learned about diversity and what that meant and the different cultures and the different perspectives that were needed in the architectural profession. And now we come to inclusion. Inclusion is belonging, and it's being part of a group. So when we think of justice and equity, we need to understand that these 2 items, when we have justice, when we remove barriers, when we were equitable and allocate based on the needs of each individual, we achieve diversity, diversity in the workplace, different cultures, and we also achieve inclusion. Now, everybody is familiar with this little cartoon, but I'll run through it with you again, just so you have a full understanding. Now, justice is just that. It's the ability for anyone to be part of something. So if you want to relate that back to architecture, what that means is the justice of architecture is that everyone and anyone can be an architect. Everyone and anyone can apply to architecture school. Ideally, we want to then move to equity. What equity means is that based on your needs, we provide the services so that everybody has as equal an advantage as we can. So there's a difference between equity and equality. Equality means everybody gets the same. Equity means that based on your needs, some people may need more help, others may need less. However, the end goal is the same for everyone. Then we move towards diversity. What diversity does, it allows no matter what your stature, what your gender, what your race, the barriers are removed for you. So those are the 3 series that we passed, that was taught these past 3 weeks. And now what we're moving towards is inclusion. Inclusion now moves you from, being able to do this and removing barriers to now being part of something. So now you get to be part of your firm. You get to be part of the team. So our focus is just that. How do we become part of? And how do we learn to enforce and encourage that inclusion? Now, it's very important for everybody to understand diversity and inclusion are not the same thing. People tend to use these terms interchangeably, but they're not the same thing. Diversity refers to a culture. Inclusion refers to your environment and workplace. So what that means to say is you can have a diverse environment. In other words, you can have an environment full of many different cultures, yet that environment still might not be inclusive if the cultures don't work together. The idea is diversity needs to lead into inclusion so that when you have these diverse cultures, they come together and they learn to work together. So it's important to understand diversity is based on culture as well as race. Different cultures, different races, that equals diversity. But when you take that a step further, then you go into inclusion. And that means those different genders, those different cultures now come to work together. So keeping all of that in mind, we need to understand the stats of architecture as it is today. For us to have an inclusive field, right, and with the understanding that this inclusion necessitates different cultures, we need to understand what is our base pool, or what are the cultures that are represented in architecture. Now, this graph comes from NCARB, and if you are a licensed architect, you are very, very, very familiar with NCARB. NCARB is the National Council of Accredited Registration Boards, and that's how you become a licensed architect. Now, your path to licensure is completely through NCARB, and NCARB has documented the different demographics within architecture. And if you notice in this picture, there is a lot of orange. And what that means to say is our demographics in the process of licensure, or where our young architects are coming from, is incredibly disproportionate. So right now, the orange of what you're seeing is white, not Hispanic or Latino people. And all the other colors represent minorities. So what this graph shows you is that we have a lot of white people and not that many minorities. So how does that translate into inclusion, right? If the idea of inclusion means different demographics coming together, but your base pool is predominantly one culture, how much inclusion can there really be, right? How does the young architect see themselves included in a firm if everyone above them or all their leadership is predominantly white, right? So then the idea comes, well, the most important thing to get to inclusion is to start to change that base. The more we diversify the base, the more inclusion we'll get later on. Now, what we looked at before was licensure candidates. What we actually have now is this graph shows us what the licensed architects are in the United States. And these two things go hand in hand, and they actually support each other. So in the candidacy for licensure, you'll see the amount of white candidates is incredibly high. Therefore, the amount of white licensed architects is as well incredibly high. We have 68.2%. And the rest of that pie is minorities. Next coming in at Asian, and after that, Latin or Hispanic. In Miami, we'll have more Latino or Hispanic here just because of the demographics that we have here in the state. Now, of that number, 70.6% of them are men. Now, I haven't spoken about the disproportionate nature of men to women in architecture until now, because it's very important to understand that we do have to have different demographics or different culture, But within that culture, it's also skewed more towards men than there is women, right? So there's different levels of inclusion. There's inclusion based on culture, these cultures coming together, and there's inclusion based on gender, genders coming together and working together. So men and women in office, but the men and women must also be part of different cultures, so that you have a well-rounded opinion and a well-rounded group of thoughts. Now, this graph is incredibly important because it outlines really the complete path of architecture and how it is framed out right now. So in the light blue, you'll notice that that is male, right? So the lighter blue is white male, and the darker blue goes to minority and multicultural males. In the same token, we have the orange color. The light orange is white females, and as the colors get darker, we have more minority females, right? If you see on the left, you'll see a lot of blue and a lot of orange and a lot of light orange. That, let's just call that entry candidates for licensure, right? As we move on, everybody joins a firm. You'll see it's pretty even. Everybody's joining a firm, light and dark, we're going into firms, right? The more you get promoted and licensed, we see a higher split. And finally, when you get to firm leadership, you'll notice towards the very end, the darker orange, there's almost none in principal leadership. The darker blue, there's almost none in principal leadership. In leadership roles, you'll see a lot of light blue and a lot of light orange. Now, why is this important in inclusion? Again, inclusion means coming together. But how do you come together if you don't see yourself belonging in the leadership roles or in the leadership of your firm? Leadership should always represent the demographic of the people that are in your office. So if there's a very strong saying, and I believe it firmly, if you can see it, you can be it. So if you don't see yourself in leadership, or if you don't see yourself represented in leadership, how can one be comfortable? How can one consider themselves belonging? And also, how can one consider themselves to be able to get there? The idea for inclusion is that you make everybody's voices heard, everybody is comfortable, and everybody feels like they belong. Now, why should you have inclusion in your architectural workplace? Inclusion in the workplace is fundamental to creating successful ideas and diversity. So offices that are inclusive are 6 times more likely to anticipate change and effectively respond to change. They're 8 times more likely to have overall better business outcomes. And they're 2.3 times likelier to have higher cash flow per employee over a 3-year period. Now, the reason for this is because when you feel included and when you feel valued, you want to go to work. You want to produce for your company. You want to be there. So having that inclusion and having that sense of value increases your productivity within the business. Now, to have inclusion in the workplace, you have to understand the dynamics of your workplace. Now, inclusion involves the day-to-day interactions between employees. What does that mean? Does your firm hire from diverse backgrounds? Are your employees diverse? Is your leadership diverse? Does your firm advocate for diverse practices? You have to understand what your firm is putting out. What are you saying to your employees? That plays a large role in whether or not you have a diverse employee pool and whether they feel included within the office and within the profession. If you are telling your employees that you matter, every single one of you matter, every single one of your voices is important, you'll have more people wanting to come work for you. If you start to only pick and choose, then one, your firm will not be diverse, and two, you'll have less people wanting to work for you. You'll be less inclusive. Now, a funny thing about this picture, I'm part of the, the social media team, and you'll see this meme around everywhere on Instagram, everywhere on Facebook. And it's this little cat looking in a mirror, but what the reflection is a lion, right? So the idea behind this is if that intern comes in and can't see themselves reflected, and so the power reflected as part of the powerful leadership that they have to work for, how can you be inclusive? How do you want an intern, and how do you want someone to want to work for your firm, to want to be a part of your firm, to want to be a part of that firm life, if they don't feel that they are represented in the leadership, if they don't feel that they are a part of the team, if they can't see themselves as being part of that principal team? So that these young interns need to view the leadership, this strong leadership, as a potential of what they can be. That is inclusion. That is being part of the team. Now, there are 8 components to an inclusive workplace. These are just 8, but there can be more. Number 1, having a voice. Number 2, the sense of belonging. Number 3, the sense of uniqueness. Number 4, the feeling of being valued. Number 5, learning and development. Number 6, collaborative environment. Number 7, access to resources. And number 8, strategic environment. Now, having a voice means that you are comfortable in your office. You feel important enough in your office to be able to talk about what's going on in the project. Are you included in what's going on? Are you included in the crits? Are you included in the decisions that go on in your office? Or maybe in the design projects that go on in your office? That is allowing your teammate, that is allowing your employees to have their voice. Do you feel that you belong to this office? Do you see yourself as a part of this team? Are you reflected in the leadership? That is belonging. Sense of uniqueness. Are your unique cultures valued in the office? If I celebrate Christmas and you celebrate Hanukkah, is that difference valued in the office? Feeling valued. Is your work valued? Does your work mean something? Do they care that you are part of the team? Learning and development. Can you grow in this office? Is there an opportunity to do more? Collaborative environment. Is your voice heard on the team? Can we all work together? Or are you just told what to do and put in the corner? Access to resources. Does management mentor you? Can you go to upper management and ask a question? Then strategic alignment. Does your company values match the values that you have in yourself? These are all things that are part of an inclusive workplace. Because a firm that includes these 8 components values the team that they have. Now, having an inclusive architectural firm. Now, having that firm is very important because when young candidates actually graduate college, you'll notice that 28% care about the culture and 25% of males care about opportunity. 34% of females care about learning opportunity and 31% care about the culture of the workplace environment. So you'll notice that not only the projects matter, but 2/3 of why any individual will want to work for your firm is linked to the firm environment. Only 1/3 are the projects that you produce within the firm. 2/3 are their work environment and how they'll be treated in the firm. And the truth is, when you think of architecture and when you think of work life in general, most of your time is spent at work. So you want to be valued and you want to be taken care of and you want to feel included where you work. Having an inclusive workplace yields 28% more engagement, 43% more employees are committed to their company, 51% are likely to recommend their company as a great place to work. Now, 51% is half. That means half your staff is likely to tell their friends that this is the place to work. That means you possibly get more staff, you'll get more work, you'll be more productive. And another important value to being inclusive is people stay longer. It's expensive to constantly train and retrain someone over and over again over the same things. Employee retention saves a company money. Now, what happens if your employees don't feel that they are inclusive, that they don't feel like they're important? You'll see from this diagram that a little bit less than 40% are likely to leave if there's no training. If they don't feel like they have friends at work or their environment at work isn't comfortable, they're likely to leave. Now, if they feel that the work impacts the community, they're able to build relationships within their firm, they have the one-on-one coaching, they have a better experience at work, they're gonna stay. So it benefits your office to be completely inclusive. You want your employees to stay. You don't want to have to train and retrain and retrain. Now, what can firms do to have an inclusive workplace? Now, understanding what we went through in COVID, the first one seems a little bit touch base, right? Introductions. Now, it seems very basic, but introduce yourself, speak to each other. Why would you want to work in a vacuum? Working in a vacuum is, you're by yourself. There's no inclusion in that. Educate your leaders. Go up and speak to them. Speak about your concerns. Feel comfortable in the ability to voice what matters to you. You can also form an inclusion council. Now, an inclusion council, similar to the diversity and inclusion committee that we have here at AIM Miami, will help you to form ideas, will help to form maybe different agendas, different things to make sure that your firm remains inclusive. We can also celebrate employee differences. Different ideas, different opinions, and different values matter to a firm. The reason that that's important is because having the same idea pool will always give you the same result. But if your idea pool is vast, you'll have different results, you'll have different ways of thinking, and you'll have possibly better ways of thinking. Leadership should always listen to their employees. And what I mean by that is listen to your employees' concerns. If there's a stressful situation in the office, your employees should be able to come to you and talk about that, and you should be able to have an HR situation where you can, help disseminate or, dissolve the situation. But that open dialogue is important. Next, you should hold frequent and effective meetings. And what that means is educate your staff on what diversity and inclusion is. Sometimes people say they understand, but what they say and how their actions speak for them are two different languages. So having everyone on the same page and creating a handbook where everyone can refer can help solve that issue. And communicate goals, and also, check your success. Have monthly or yearly, progress reports. Look to your left, look to your right as leadership. Are the people to your left and right a proper representation of the demographics that make up your company? If the answer is no, then you have work to do. If the answer is yes, how do you maintain that? Now that your leadership represents your demographics, how do you keep those demographics? How do you, increase those demographics? How do you make this better? These are the things you need to think about when you want to think about inclusion within your office. Lastly, it's incredibly important for you to find your voice as a young architect and for you to find your seat at the table, right? There's a lot of conversation about get your seat at the table, but what does that actually mean? That means being fully included in what is going on. And sometimes that means including yourself and not waiting for someone to ask you to join a committee or ask you to join, leadership roles. As much as the firm needs to be inclusive, employees themselves also need to make the effort to include themselves. So I leave you with this today. Find your voice and find your seat at the table. Inclusion works both ways. Employees have the responsibility to include the employees in what goes on in the office, but employees have the responsibility themselves to make sure that their voices are heard and to speak up when necessary. These past 4 weeks, JEDI and Diversity and Inclusion Committee of Miami have focused on what we need to do to make an inclusive architectural environment. We have called this the JEDI advantage, because having justice, being equitable, having diversity, and now understanding inclusion in architecture will give your firm an advantage over firms that choose not to do this. To be honest, I don't know what firm would choose not to do this in the times we have now, but understand that these terms and these ideals are advantages to your architectural firm. They make your firm better. They make the ideas in your firm more diverse. And they give opportunities to people who otherwise may not have had the opportunity themselves. I thank you, and I open to any and all questions at this point.
There's a question in the chat from Tess.
Yes.
What do you think? How have these stats been affected by work from home and remote work? And are there more opportunities for inclusion building in the virtual world versus in person?
In the virtual world, again, it's a little bit harder only because you are in that vacuum at home, right? But in any case, even from working from home, you still have links to your colleagues, you still have links to your bosses, you still have links to the firm or job itself, right? So what happens when you come together? The idea of inclusion is what happens when we come together. Do you feel included when we come together, right? So does it make it harder because we're working from home? Slightly, but it doesn't make it impossible. Just because you work from home or just because we're forced to work from home now doesn't mean I should only hire one form of demographics, doesn't mean that I should only include one form of demographics in decisions, right? So the idea behind that is, even though we work from home, even though we're separated, I still deserve to be included in the decisions of where I work, and my work environment still needs to be inclusive. Does that answer your question?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Sorry, I was having trouble with my my microphone, and thank you, whoever that was that jumped in and read the question. Did you answer the question, the last part of her question that says, are there more opportunities for inclusion building in the virtual world?
More opportunities. You can do inclusion building in the virtual world. And again, it is harder. You have to be more unique in how you go about that. However, it is possible. Again, I say this, inclusion, you have to understand there's a difference between diversity and inclusion. Inclusion is what happens when we come together. So whether you're virtual or not, that coming together of meetings, ideas, what's going on in the workplace, that still happens, right? So inclusion means that I deserve to be a part of that. So whether we're virtual or not, that being a part of is still important.
And we have another question from Hagar Abdo. What is your advice for those who find it difficult to speak up or find their voice?
That is an amazing question. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a backstory for me. I discovered my voice about 2 years ago. I've been in the architectural field for 14 years. So finding your voice, sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not. What I would suggest to someone, and what helped me, is find a mentor that you feel comfortable with and that you feel that you can talk to. Because there's strength in numbers. And when you find that mentor, you build your confidence and then you build your ability to speak. So my greatest advice in that is find that mentor that can help you find your voice. And then once you have your voice, don't ever be afraid to use it.
Those are all the questions we have. Does anyone else have a question or a comment?
I was going to make a comment. This is Naomi, just to kind of expound on what Nadine said, and to answer Tess's question, or make a statement to that, is that, firms need to, and they've realized this obviously in the last year and a half, especially with the circumstances that we're on, to just adapt. And adaptation also means making greater effort to try and find things that are more inclusive on a virtual platform, as everybody has adapted to that. So sometimes you can even get more of your voice heard when you have these virtual platforms, because, you have no choice but to be on this video. And, if you make that effort to have somebody specifically speak or answer a question or be involved in something, I don't know, whether it be, games, happy hour, introducing a project, doing any of these things. So the virtual platform has helped in that manner, depending on how offices use it.
Vanessa had a question. Vanessa Smith-Torres. What advice do you have for firm leaders who can help young staff find their voices?
Colleen, you broke up, so.
Oh, sorry. Let's
I
see.
think you froze, Nadine.
Yeah, I thought so. You looked a
Yeah,
little
she had
frozen.
a look.
Oh, great.
Okay, here, I'm going to give that again from Vanessa Smith-Torres. What advice do you have for firm leaders who can help young staff members find their voices? And if she's frozen, can anyone else on the committee answer that? Craig?
There is a thunderstorm going on, so I'm pretty
I
sure that's
know.
affecting.
Well, I'll, kind of expand on my own question because,
Okay.
communication is a two-way street, right? So, for firm leaders, we might say, to the young staff, find your voice, seize opportunities, etc. But how do we as firm leaders actively encourage that? What are some of the actions that we can do that once that young staff member does find their voice, to make sure that we are listening, and they not only did they find their voice, but they feel like their voice is being heard. And I personally don't have answers to that, but I think it's an important thing, to actively listen, right? To be able to let those young staff know that they're being heard, any concerns they have are being dealt with, or that, if they're whatever interests they have are being supported. So that active listening.
To add to that too, Vanessa, it's not only firm leaders that need to do this, but those that are in the firm can help and encourage others around them to speak up, or to give them advice on how to speak up, or to lead by example, on how to let their voice be heard, or encourage them in that respect also. So again, it's office culture that comes into play there too.
I think, can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
I think to add to that, I think office leadership could also, the important thing is you need to be relatable, right? As leadership, I think it's important to come out of your office and speak to your young employees and be relatable. Speak to them on their level. Don't speak above, but have a conversation, a simple conversation. Those things make it easier for your younger employees to talk back and to feel comfortable. So I think mentorship is important, but also leadership learning how to be more relatable is also very important as well.
Well, I'm in agreement with everything everyone has said here, but just to contribute a little bit. Everybody has their own background and their own story to tell. We can learn from everyone, whether your experience is just a year or two in the profession. You have your story, and your story is important. It is inspiring to people who are listening, whether you think it is inspiring or not. There is someone that will benefit from you telling your story. So I do believe everyone has something to contribute, and therefore you should be confident to share that story. I've heard some wonderful and inspiring stories from recent graduates. I've heard some extremely inspiring stories from students who are in school and what they have gone through to reach where they are, now. So I think everyone should be confident about telling their story, because there is only one you. There is only one story that you can tell. Nobody else can tell your story. And just in that alone, you are unique and you have something to contribute. And you will help somebody else to cross an obstacle that they may be going through because of your story. So I would say, tell it, and be confident about that, because of that, you can be sure. That's my contribution.
Does anybody else have any more questions or comments? Are you frozen again, Nadine?
I hope I'm not frozen again.
No, you're not. You're just sitting very still. Let's see. Oh, excellent presentation, Nadine. Well, I just wanted to thank everybody for coming. And Nadine, do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up this evening?
Yes. First of all, I want to thank everyone who listened to the 4 rounds. Justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Thank you so very much for taking this trip with us and for wanting to learn more and wanting to understand more. We're learning this together, we're growing together, and we're gonna finish this together, right? So we have a lot of work to do in the architectural profession. AIA Miami is putting in the work, and we're here for you. So I confidently speak for all the licensed architects and all the leadership roles that younger junior architects and those coming in. Tell me your story. Let me help you grow. Let me help you do more. Let me help you do more than I could have ever done. We are here to support you. We're here to promote you, and we're here to push you further than you can ever go. So thank you, and keep up the work.
And on that wonderful closing note, we'd like to thank you so much, Nadine, for everything, and for the rest of the committee and the great work you guys have done. And to everyone attending tonight, this event has been recorded. All 4 of the programs will be on our YouTube channel, and look for a brief survey from me, which will have the link to the recording. And we're always trying to improve our programming. So we'll send out a brief survey asking for ways that you think we can improve, and ideas. If you have any ideas for other programming, we'd certainly love to hear them. And on that note, I'd like to say good night and thank you to everyone. Thanks for stopping by.
Night, night.